So a historic day for economic diplomacy. That's how US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has described a deal by 130 countries to reform the global tax system and make sure that big companies pay a fair share wherever they operate. It would see multinationals pay a minimum rate of at least 15% and pay tax in the countries where their profits are made. Tech giants such as Amazon have long been criticised for channeling their profits to tax haven countries to minimise what they pay. The OECD, which led the talks, said that the plans could generate around $150 billion in extra tax revenues per year. But for some, the deal doesn't go far enough, as the BBC's Andrew Walker explains.
But I have to say, it still has had some criticism from campaigners. They regard the figure of 15% as which is being suggested as the minimum rate of corporate tax. I would add that the agreement says at least 15%. This is not all definitively nailed down, so that does suggest there might be some room for negotiation, but I'd be a little surprised if we go beyond that. But certainly campaigners reckon that the figure should be higher, and that if it were higher, it could generate a lot of additional money, especially for developing countries who, those campaigners say, are getting a bit of a raw deal from this. Some have described this as a money grab by the G7 leading developed economies.
Andrew Walker there, while Chris Sanger advises companies on global tax policy. The consultants EY, welcome to you. Thanks very much for being with us. So what, in practice, will these changes deliver?
Well, what we've seen with the 130 countries of the inclusive framework, or that's 139 in the full inclusive framework, so there are 9 countries that didn't sign up to this. But what this is actually showing is a real fundamental change in the way that tax is distributed around the world. We've got 2 elements, the first of which is the taxation of the largest multinationals, so those with 20 billion turnover or more, and an element of their profit is now being redistributed back to where their customers are. So those countries with the customers will be able to tax that profit rather than where they are based or where they're headquartered. Now, the other part to that is this global minimum tax, and that is an optional agreement that's being put forward as a common practice. So rather than this being obligatory on the 130 countries that have signed up, what they've agreed here is that if you're going to implement this, you have to do it in the way that's been agreed. So there's some uncertainty about how many countries will actually go ahead with this global minimum tax.
And what kind of time frame are we looking at here? How quickly will these changes be implemented?
Well, I think that's one of the real surprises, is actually there's a huge amount of acceleration going along with this. I think many people, when we started looking at this project, thought that this was potentially into the never. With the US change in administration and the new change in policy, that's given a huge real boost to getting things done quickly, and we've seen that also with the EU. So we've got the details of the technical proposal being agreed by October this year, with the idea that countries would be able to sign up next year and implementation the year after. So 2023, which in tax terms is basically already here.
And are there any potential obstacles remaining? For example, whether President Biden can actually get this through the US Congress?
Yes, absolutely. This has been done as a 2-pillar deal, both the taxation of the global multinationals at the highest level, and also that global minimum tax. If the US cannot deliver on or does not deliver on the changes it has on one side, on say the taxation of the 20 billion pound company, the question is, will that mean that this grinds to a halt? I think there's actually quite a lot of momentum outside of the US, but clearly what happens with the US and the changes that are there are going to be critical to make sure that it encourages those countries that have signed up in principle to the global minimum tax to actually go ahead with this. But definitely there are still some significant uncertainties between now and 2023.
OK, Chris Sanger, thanks very much for your